ยบ่ยากลำคาญการผิดเส้นนี้ผิดประเพณีพลวิสัยขอภัยลาพี่ที่ใดเกิดมีบ่ฮักไกลเสื้อลาวสาวไทยเกือบสิ้นสูญไปได้เสียเสือควรลือน้องพี่เขาจะยินดีไปอย่างใดอย่าคงเขานี่เอ้ยแล้วเขานี่เอ้ยเหตุคือบ่เคยจะมาเสยบ่อยากลำคาญคือกองมองไม่เป็นที่เสียใจให้หวนเห็นให้ผู้เส้นนี้ที่คืนทันทีอย่ามัวฝันเสื้อเผ่าเฮานั้นต้องทุกเตือนกันทุกเวลาหาที่ป้องกันประเทศเฮานั้นให้มันคงอย่าทงเขานี่เอ้ยแล้วเขานี่เอ้ยเหตุคือบ่เคยจะมาเสยบ่อยากลำคาญถ้าที่ดีเลิศอันจะประเสริฐสมใจปองลาวเขาพี่น้องต้องหักแพงกันนั้นแสนดีสวยสร้างความดีจนหมดชีวิตที่มันหมายเป็นตายความทุกข์เป็นสุขยิ่งดีดังนี้ไป
left and right parentheses. This entire article contains 0 references. Laos emerged from the French colonial empire as an independent country in 1953. Laos exists in truncated form from the 13th century Lao kingdom of Lanzang. Lanzang existed as a unified kingdom from 1357 to 1707, divided into the 3 rival kingdoms of Luang Prabang, Vientiane, and Champasak from 1707 to 1779, fell to Siamese suzerainty from 1779 to 1893, and was reunified under the French Protectorate of Laos in 1893. The borders of the modern state of Laos were established by the French colonial government in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Part 1: Prehistory in Laos. The Mekong River Valley region is one of the cradles of human civilization. Anatomically, modern humans have inhabited the regions around modern Laos since the late Pleistocene to early Holocene eras. In 2009, an ancient skull was recovered from Tampaling Cave in the Annamite range of northern Laos, which was dated between 46,000 and 63,000 years old, making it the oldest fully modern human remains found to date in Southeast Asia. 1. The findings are critical to understanding the migration patterns of early humans, who traveled in successive waves moving west to east following the coastlines, but also moving further inland and further north than previously theorized. Archaeological exploration in Laos has been limited due to rugged and remote topography, a history of 20th century conflicts which have left over 2 million tons of unexploded ordnance throughout the country, and local sensitivities to history which involve the communist government of Laos, village authorities and rural poverty. The first archaeological explorations of Laos began with French explorers acting under the auspices of the École Française d'Extrême Orient. However, due to the Laos Civil War, it is only since the 1990s that serious archaeological efforts have been in Laos. Since 2005, one such effort, the Middle Mekong Archaeological Project, MMAP, has excavated and surveyed numerous sites along the Mekong and its tributaries around Luang Prabang in northern Laos, with the goal of investigating early human settlement of the Mekong River valleys. Archaeological evidence suggests that agriculture and later metallurgy developed in Laos during the Middle Holocene, 6000 to 2000 BCE. During this period, the first evidence of ceramics and farming practices emerged. Hunting and gathering Hobonian societies began to settle and rice cultivation was introduced from southern China. The earliest inhabitants of Laos belonged to the Austro-Asiatic language family. These earliest societies are the ancestors of the upland Lao ethnicities known collectively as Laotian, with the largest ethnic groups being the Khmer of northern Laos and the Brau and Katang in the south. Part 1. Prehistory in Laos. Chapter 1. The Plain of Jars. From the 8th century BCE to as late as the 2nd century CE, an inland trading society emerged on the Jinghuang Plateau, near Laos' most remarkable megalithic remains on a site called the Plain of Jars. The Plain of Jars was nominated to the tentative list as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1992, and unexploded ordnance has continued to be removed from the site since 1998. The jars are stone sarcophagi dating from the early Iron Age, 500 BC to 800 C, and contained evidence of human remains, burial goods and ceramics. Some sites contain more than 250 individual jars. The tallest jars are more than 3 meters in height. Little is known about the megalithic culture which produced the jars, but the jars and prevalence of iron ore in the region suggest that people who created the site grew wealthy from overland trade routes. Part 2. Early Kingdoms. The first recorded indigenous kingdom to emerge in Southeast Asia was recorded in Chinese histories as the Kingdom of Funan and was located in the area of modern Cambodia and the coasts of southern Vietnam and southern Thailand during the 1st century CE. Funan was part of Greater India and was heavily influenced by early Hindu civilization. By the 2nd century CE, Malayo-Polynesian settlers in what is today South Vietnam had established a rival Inca kingdom known as Kampa. The Cham people established the first settlements near modern Champasak, Laos. Funan forced the Cham people out of the Champasak region by the 6th century CE, where the Chenla Proto-Khmer people would establish the earliest kingdom in Laos. The capital of early Chenla was Shrustapura, which was located in the vicinity of Champasak and the UNESCO World Heritage Site of Wat Phu. Wat Phu is a vast temple complex in southern Laos which combined natural surroundings with ornate sandstone structures, which were maintained and embellished by the Chenla peoples until 900 CE, and were subsequently rediscovered and embellished by the Khmer in the 10th century. By the 8th century CE, Chenla had divided into Land Chenla, located in Laos, and Water Chenla, founded by Mahendravarman near Sambor Prakuk in Cambodia. Land Chenla was known to the Chinese as Polu, or Wendan, and dispatched a trade mission to the Tang dynasty court in 717 CE. Water Chenla would come under repeated attack from Kampa, the Medang Sea kingdoms in Indonesia based in Java, and finally pirates. From the instability the Khmer emerged, and under the King Jayavarman II the Khmer Empire began to take shape in the 9th century CE. In the area which is modern northern and central Laos and northeast Thailand, the Mon people established their own kingdoms during the 8th century CE, outside the reach of the contracting Chenla kingdoms. By the 6th century in the Chao Phraya River Valley, Mon peoples had coalesced to create the Dvaravati kingdoms. In the north, Harapanjaya, Lamphan, emerged as a rival power to the Dvaravati. By the 8th century the Mon had pushed north to create city-states known as Muang in Phadiat, northeast Thailand, Srigotapura, Sikhotabong, near modern Kek, Laos, Muang Swa, Luang Prabang, and Chantaburi, Vientiane. In the 8th century CE, Srigotapura, Sikhotabong, was the strongest of these early city-states and controlled trade throughout the Middle Mekong region. The city-states were loosely bound politically, but were culturally similar and introduced their Theravada Buddhism from Sri Lankan missionaries throughout the region. Part 3. The Thai Migrations. The Chinese Han Dynasty chronicles of the southern military campaigns provide the first written accounts of Thai Gadar-speaking peoples who inhabited the areas of modern Yunnan China and Guangxi. The Lao are the culturally and politically dominant ethnicity in modern Laos and are a subgroup within the Thai Gadar family. The Thai peoples, which include Thai Lao, Thai Siam or Thai Thai, Shan, Thai Ding, Thai Dam, Thai Yai, Thai Lu, Thai Phuan and others, began moving south and westward from their ancestral homelands in southern China and northwest Vietnam in the 8th century CE. In the 750s CE the Kingdom of Nansha managed to defeat four invading Chinese armies, creating a buffer state from Chinese expansion into Southeast Asia for approximately 150 years. As a consequence the Thai were able to put pressure on the settled Mon areas, while the Khmer Empire expanded north and westward from Angkor to absorb most of the Indo-Chinese peninsula from the 8th to the 12th centuries CE. By the 12th century CE the Khmer Empire had reached its zenith, moving as far north as Chandapuri, Vientiane, and had established trading outposts at Zaiphong on the Karat Plateau. The Mongol invasions of Yunnan China, 1253 to 1256, led to an influx of Thai peoples in two areas of northern Laos, where they had been slowly expanding since the 8th century. The Thai kingdom of Lanna was founded in 1259, in the north of modern Thailand. The Sukhothai kingdom was founded in 1279, in modern Thailand, and expanded eastward to take the city of Chantaburi and renamed it to Vientiane Vientiane, modern Vientiane, and northward to the city of Muang Swa, which was taken in 1271 and renamed the city to Jingdong Jingthong, or City of Flame Trees beside the river Dong, modern Luang Prabang, Laos. The Thai peoples had firmly established control in areas to the northeast of the declining Khmer Empire, following the death of the Sukhothai king Ram Khamhaen and internal disputes within the kingdom of Lanna. Both Vientiane Vientiane, Vientiane, and Jingdong Jingthong, Luang Prabang, were independent city-states until the founding of Lanzang in 1354. Part 3. The Thai Migrations. Chapter 1. The Legend of Kunbaram. The history of the Thai migrations into Laos were preserved in myth and legends. The Nithan Kunbaram, or Story of Kunbaram, recalls the origin myths of the Lao, and follows the exploits of his 7 sons to found the Thai kingdoms of Southeast Asia. The myths also recorded the laws of Kunbaram, which set the basis of common law and identity among the Lao. Among the Khamu, the exploits of their folk hero Thao Hung are recounted in the Thao Hung Thao Chuang epic, which dramatizes the struggles of the indigenous peoples with the influx of Thai during the migration period. In later centuries, the Lao themselves would preserve the legend in written form, becoming one of the great literary treasures of Laos and one of the few depictions of life in Southeast Asia prior to their Theravada Buddhism and Thai cultural influence. Part 4, Lanzang, 1354 to 1707. Lanzang, 1353 to 1707, was one of the largest kingdoms in Southeast Asia. Also known as the Land of a Million Elephants under the White Parasol, the kingdom's name alludes to the power of the kingship and formidable war machine of the early kingdom. The founding of Lanzang was recorded in 1353, after a series of conquests by Phagam. From 1353 to 1560, the capital of Lanzang was Luang Prabang. Known alternately as Muang Sua and Jingdong Jingthong. Under successive kings, the kingdom expanded its sphere of influence over an area that now incorporates all of modern Laos, the Sip Song Chutai of Vietnam, Sip Song Pana of southern China, Karat Plateau region of Thailand, and the Stung Treng region of northern Cambodia. Lanzang existed as a sovereign kingdom for over 350 years. The first serious foreign invasion came from the Dai Viet in 1479, which was defeated, though leaving the capital of Luang Prabang largely destroyed. The first half of the 16th century allowed for the power, prestige and cultural influence of the kingdom to be restored under a series of strong kings. See Suvarnabalang, Vixen, Phottisarath. In the 1540s, a series of succession disputes in the neighboring kingdom of Lanna created a regional rivalry between Burma, Airtai and Lanzang. In 1540, Lanzang defeated an incursion from Airtai. By 1545, the kingdom of Lanna was attacked by the Burmese and then Airtai. Lanzang entered into an alliance with Lanna and aided in the defense of the kingdom. In 1547, the kingdoms of Lanzang and Lanna were briefly unified under Phottisarath of Lanzang and his son Sethatharath in Lanna. Sethatharath would go on to become the king of Lanzang on the death of his father, and become one of the greatest kings of Lanzang. The Burmese Taungoo dynasty began a series of expansions during the late 1550s, which culminated under King Bayanong. Sethatharath moved the capital of Lanzang from Luang Prabang to Vientiane in 1560, to better defend against the threat of Burma and to more ably administer the central and southern provinces. Bayanong subjugated the kingdom of Lanna and went on to destroy the kingdom and city of Ayutthaya in 1564. King Sethatharath fought 2 successful guerrilla campaigns against the Burmese invasions, leaving Lanzang the only independent Thai kingdom until his death in 1572, while on campaign against the Khmer. The Burmese succeeded with the 3rd invasion of Lanzang around 1573, and Lanzang became a vassal state until 1591, when the son of Sethatharath, Nokyo Kumain, was able to successfully reassert independence. Lanzang recovered and reached the apex of its political and economic power during the 17th century under King Sorignavongsa, who became the longest reigning of Lanzang's monarchs. 1637 to 1694. In the 1640s, the first European explorers to leave a detailed account of the kingdom arrived looking to establish trade and secure Christian converts. Both were ultimately largely unsuccessful. Upon the death of Sorignavongsa, a succession dispute erupted and the kingdom of Lanzang was ultimately divided into constituent kingdoms in 1707. Part 5, Regional Kingdoms, 1707 to 1779. Beginning in 1707, the Lao Kingdom of Lensang was partitioned into regional kingdoms of Vientiane, Luang Prabang and later Champasak. 1713. The Kingdom of Vientiane was the strongest of the three, with Vientiane extending influence across the Karat Plateau, now a part of modern Thailand, and conflicting with the Kingdom of Luang Prabang for control of the Jinhuang Plateau, on the border of modern Vietnam. The Kingdom of Luang Prabang was the first of the regional kingdoms to emerge in 1707, when King Xiong Hu of Lensang was challenged by King Kitsarat, the grandson of Sorignathongsa. Xiong Hu and his family had sought asylum in Vietnam when they were exiled during the reign of Sorignathongsa. Xiong Hu gained the support of the Vietnamese Emperor Le Duy Heap in exchange for recognition of Vietnamese suzerainty over Lensang. At the head of a Vietnamese army, Xiong Hu attacked Vientiane and executed King Nan Thrat, another claimant to the throne. In response, Sorignathongsa's grandson King Kitsarat rebelled and moved with his own army from the Sip Song Panid toward Luang Prabang. King Kitsarat then moved south to challenge Xiong Hu in Vientiane. Xiong Hu then turned toward the kingdom of Ayutthaya for support, and an army was dispatched which, rather than supporting Xiong Hu, arbitrated the division between Luang Prabang and Vientiane. In 1713, the southern Lao nobility continued the rebellion against Xiong Hu under Nokasad, a nephew of Sorignathongsa, and the Kingdom of Champasak emerged. The Kingdom of Champasak comprised the area south of the Zibang River as far as Stung Treng, together with the areas of the Lower Mun and Chi rivers on the Karat Plateau. Although less populous than either Luang Prabang or Vientiane, Champasak occupied an important position for regional power and international trade via the Mekong River. Throughout the 1760s and 1770s, the kingdoms of Siam and Burma competed against each other in a bitter armed rivalry, and sought out alliances with the Lao kingdoms to strengthen their relative positions by adding to their own forces and denying them to their enemy. As a result, the use of competing alliances would further militarize the conflict between the northerly Lao kingdoms of Luang Prabang and Vientiane. Between the two major Lao kingdoms, if an alliance with one was sought by either Burma or Siam, the other would tend to support the remaining side. The network of alliances shifted with the political and military landscape throughout the latter half of the 18th century. Part 6. Siam and Suzerainty, 1779 to 1893. By 1779, General Taksin had driven the Burmese from Siam, had overrun the Lao kingdoms of Champasak and Vientiane, and forced Luang Prabang to accept vassalage. Luang Prabang had aided Siam during the siege of Vientiane. Traditional power relationships in Southeast Asia followed the Mandala model. Warfare was waged to secure population centers for Corvée labor, control regional trade, and confirm religious and secular authority by controlling potent Buddhist symbols. White elephants, important stupas, temples, and Buddha images. To legitimize the Thonburi dynasty, General Taksin seized the Emerald Buddha and Phrabang images from Vientiane. Taksin also demanded that the ruling elites of the Lao kingdoms and their royal families pledge vassalage to Siam in order to retain their regional autonomy in accordance with the Mandala model. In the traditional Mandala model, vassal kings retained their power to raise tax, discipline their own vassals, inflict capital punishment, and appoint their own officials. Only matters of war and succession required approval from the suzerain. Vassals were also expected to provide annual tribute of gold and silver, traditionally modeled into trees, provide tax and tax in kind, raise support armies in time of war, and provide corvée labor for state projects. However, by 1782 Taksin had been deposed and Rama I was king of Siam, and began a series of reforms which fundamentally altered the traditional Mandala. Many of the reforms took place to more closely administer and assimilate the Karat Plateau, or Ison. which was traditionally and culturally part of the Lao Kingdom's tributary networks. In 1778, only Nakhon Ratchasima was a tributary of Siam, yet by the end of the reign of Rama Isa Sakit, Ubon, Roy Yasathon, Khon Ka-ian, and Kalasin paid tribute directly to Bangkok, according to Thai records, by 1826. Less than 50 years. The number of towns and cities in Isan had grown from 13 to 35. Forced population transfers from Lao areas were further reinforced by Corvée labor projects and increased taxes. Siam required labor to help rebuild from repeated Burmese invasions and growing sea trade. Increasing the productivity and population living on the Karat Plateau provided the labor and material access to strengthen Siam. Sirabunyasan, the last independent king of Vientiane, had died by 1780, and his sons Nanth Asen, Enthevong, and Anuvong had been taken to Bangkok as prisoners during the sack of Vientiane in 1779. The sons would become successive kings of Vientiane under Siamese suzerainty. Beginning with Nanth Asen in 1781, Nanth Asen was allowed to return to Vientiane with the Phrabang, the Palladium of Lansang. The Emerald Buddha remained in Bangkok and became an important symbol to the Lao of their captivity. One of Nanth Asen's first acts was to seize Chao Somth Huaphuan, prince from Jinghuang, who had entered into a tributary relationship with Vietnam, and released him only when it was agreed that Jinghuang would also acknowledge Vientiane as suzerain. In 1791, Anurata was confirmed by Rama I as king of Luang Prabang. By 1792, Nanth Asen had convinced Rama I that Anurata was secretly dealing with the Burmese, and Siam allowed Nanth Asen to lead an army and besiege and capture Luang Prabang. Anurata was sent to Bangkok as a prisoner, and only through diplomatic exchanges facilitated by China was Anurata released in 1795. Soon after Anurata's release, it was alleged that Nanth Asen had been plotting with the governor of Nakhon Phanom to rebel against Siam. Rama I ordered the immediate arrest of Nanth Asen, and soon after he died in captivity. Enthevong 1795 to 1804 became the next king of Vientiane, and dispatched armies to aid Siam against Burmese invasions in 1797 and 1802, and to capture the Sepsong Shotai, with his brother Anuvong as general. Part 6, Siam and Suzerainty, Chapter 1, Anuvong's Rebellion and Lao Nationalism. Anuvong is a symbolic and controversial figure even today. His short-lived rebellion against Siam from 1826 to 1829 ultimately proved futile and led to the total annihilation of Vientiane as a kingdom and a city. Yet among the Lao he remains a potent symbol of unyielding defiance and national identity. Thai and Vietnamese histories record that Anuvong rebelled as the result of personal insults suffered at the funeral of Rama II in Bangkok. Yet, the Anuvong rebellion lasted 3 years and engulfed the whole of the Karat Plateau for more complex reasons. The history of forced population transfers, Corvée labor projects, loss of national symbols and prestige. Most notably the Emerald Buddha formed the backdrop to specific actions taken by Rama II to directly annex the Isan region. In 1812, Siam and Vietnam were at odds over the succession of the Cambodian king. The Vietnamese gained the upper hand with their chosen successor, and Siam compensated itself by annexing territory on the Dang Rek Mountains and along the Mekong River in Stung Treng. As a result, Lao international trade along the Mekong was effectively blockaded, and heavy duties were imposed on Lao merchants who were viewed suspiciously by Siam for their trade with both the Cambodians and Vietnamese. In 1819, a rebellion in Champasak provided Anuvong with opportunity, and he dispatched an army under his son Nio who managed to suppress the conflict. In exchange, Anuvong successfully made the case that his son decrowned as king in Champasak, which was confirmed by Bangkok. Anuvong had successfully expanded his influence throughout Vientiane, Isan, Jinghuang and now Champasak. Nu Vong dispatched a number of diplomatic missions to Luang Prabang, which were viewed suspiciously in light of his growing regional influence. By 1825 Rama II had died, and Rama II I was consolidating his position against Prince Mongkut. Rama IV. In the ensuing power struggle before the accession of Rama II I, one of Nu Vong's grandsons was killed. When Nu Vong arrived for the funerary services, he made several requests of the king Rama II I which were dismissed, including the return of his sister who had been captured in 1779, and Lao families which had been relocated to Saraburi near Bangkok. Before returning to Vientiane, Nu Vong's son Gao, the crown prince, was forced to perform manual labor during which he was beaten. Early in his reign, Rama II I ordered a census of all peoples on the Karat Plateau. The census involved the forced tattooing of each village's census number and name of their village. The aim of the policy was to more tightly administer Lao territories from Bangkok and was facilitated by the nobility Siam had installed in the newly created cities throughout the region. Popular resentment against the forced tattooing and increased taxes became casus belli for rebellion. Toward the end of 1826 Nu Vong was making military preparations for armed rebellion. Nu Vong's strategy involved three objectives. First was to repatriate all ethnic Lao living in Siam to the right bank of the Mekong and execute any Siamese engaged in the tattooing of Lao. The second objective was to consolidate Lao power by forging an alliance with Chiang Mai and Luang Prabang. The third and final goal was to gain international support from either the Vietnamese, Chinese, Burmese or British. In January hostilities commenced, and the Lao armies were sent from Vientiane to capture Nakhon Ratchasima, Kalasin, and Lomsak. From Champasak forces rushed to take Ubon and Suvarnabhumi, while pursuing a scorched turf policy ensuring the Lao time to retreat. Nu Vong's forces pushed south eventually to Saraburi to free the Lao there, but the flood of refugees pushing north slowed the army's retreat. Nu Vong also severely underestimated the Siamese arms stockpile, which under the terms of Berne Treaty had provided Siam with weaponry from the Napoleonic Wars in Europe. A Lao defense was staged at Nong Bua Lamthu, the traditional Lao stronghold in the Isan, but the Siamese emerged victorious and leveled the city. The Siamese pushed north to take Vientiane and Nu Vong fled southeast to the border with Vietnam. By 1828 Nu Vong had been captured, tortured and sent to Bangkok with his family to die in a cage. Rama II I ordered Chao Bodin to return and level the city of Vientiane, and forcibly move the entire population of the former Lao capital to the Isan region. Part 6, Siam and Suzerainty Chapter 2, Aftermath and Vietnamese Intervention. Following the Nu Vong rebellion, Siam and Vietnam were increasingly at odds over control of the Indo-Chinese peninsula. In 1831 Emperor Minh Mang sent Vietnamese troops to seize Giang and annexed the area as the province of Tran Ninh. Also in 1831 and again in 1833 King Manthatoreth sent a tributary mission to the Vietnamese, which were quietly ignored so as not to antagonize the Siamese further. In 1893 these tributary missions from Luang Prabang were used by the French as part of a legal argument for all the territories on the east bank of the Mekong. In late 1831 Siam and Vietnam had a series of wars. Siamese-Vietnamese War 1831–1834 and Siamese-Vietnamese War 1841–1845. Over control of Giang and Cambodia. In the aftermath of Vientiane's destruction, the Siamese divided the Lao lands into three administrative regions. In the north, the king of Luang Prabang and a small Siamese garrison controlled Luang Prabang, the Sip Song Pana, and Sip Song Chau Tai. The central region was administered from Nong Ka Ai and extended to the borders of Tran Ninh, Jinkuang, and south to Champasak. The southern regions were controlled from Champasak and extended to areas bordering Cochin China and Cambodia. From the 1830s through the 1860s small rebellions took place across Lao lands and the Karat Plateau. but they lacked both the scale and coordination of the Anu Vong Rebellion. Importantly, at the end of each rebellion, Siamese troops would return to their administrative centers, and no Lao region was allowed to have a build-up of force which could have been used in rebellion. Part 6, Siam and Suzerainty, Chapter 3, Population Transfers and Slavery. Population transfers of ethnic Lao to Siam began in 1779 with Siamese suzerainty. Artisans and members of the court were forcibly moved to Saraburi near Bangkok, and several thousand farmers and peasants who were transported throughout Siam to Phetchaburi, Ratchaburi, and Nakhonchai in the southwest and to Prakinburi and Chanthaburi in the southeast. However, massive deportations estimated between 100,000 and 300,000 people began following the defeat of King Anu Vong in 1828 and would continue until the 1870s. From 1828 to 1830 over 66,000 people were forcibly relocated from Vientiane. In 1834 the first of several relocations of the Phuan areas of Jinghuang began, transferring more than 6,000 people. Most of those relocated were settled in the Isan region and were considered that Chaloe, or war slaves, who were to serve as serfs in underpopulated areas for the Thai elite. The result changed the demographics and cultural traditions of Thailand and Laos and continues today with a five-fold disparity between the ethnic Lao living on the west bank of the Mekong and those left in the east in what is today Laos. Although slavery existed in Lao areas before the rebellion in 1828, the defeat and subsequent removal of most ethnic Lao left a depopulated and vulnerable position for the remaining people of the east bank of the Mekong. Laothiang Hill tribes which had little involvement in the 1828 rebellion bore the brunt of organized slave raids into Laos and became known collectively and pejoratively in Thai and Lao as ka, or slaves. Laothiang were hunted or sold into slavery. Frequent organized raiding parties from Vietnam, Cambodia, Siam, Laos and China. Larger tribes of Laothiang, such as the Brau, would conduct slave raids against weaker tribes. The raids continued throughout the remainder of the 19th century. A Siamese military campaign in Laos in 1876 was described by a British observer as having been transformed into slave hunting raids on a large scale. The population transfers and slave raids ameliorated toward the end of the 19th century when European observers and anti-slavery groups made their presence increasingly difficult for the Bangkok elite. In 1880 both slave raiding and trading became illegal, although debt slavery would persist until 1905 by decree of King Chulalongkorn. The French would use the existence of slavery in Siam as one of the major professed motivations for establishing a protectorate of Laos during the 1880s and 1890s. Part 6, Siam and Suzerainty, Chapter 4, The Hoa Wars. In the 1840s sporadic rebellions, slave raids, and movement of refugees throughout the areas that would become modern Laos left whole regions politically and militarily weak. In China the Qing dynasty was pushing south to incorporate hill peoples into the central administration. At first floods of refugees and later bands of rebels from the Taiping Rebellion pushed into Lao lands. The rebel groups became known by their banners and included the yellow or striped flags, red flags and the black flags. The bandit groups rampaged throughout the countryside, with little response from Siam. During the early and mid-19th century the first Lao Sung including the Hmong, Miem, Biao and other Sino-Tibetan groups began settling in the higher elevations of Phongzali province and northeast Laos. The influx of immigration was facilitated by the same political weakness which had given shelter to the Hoa bandits and left large depopulated areas throughout Laos. By the 1860s the first French explorers were pushing north, charting the path of the Mekong River, with hope of a navigable waterway to southern China. Among the early French explorers was an expedition led by Francis Garnier, who was killed during an expedition by Hoa rebels in northern Laos. The French would increasingly conduct military campaigns against the Hoa in both Laos and Vietnam. Tonkin, until the 1880s. Part 7. Colonialism and the French Protectorate of Laos. 1893 to 1953. French colonial interests in Laos began with the exploratory missions of Dudot de Laigre and Francis Garnier during the 1860s in the hopes of utilizing the Mekong River as a passage to southern China. Although the Mekong is unnavigable due to a number of rapids, the hope was that the river might be tamed with the help of French engineering and a combination of railways. In 1886, Britain secured the right to appoint a representative in Chiang Mai, in northern Siam, to counter British control in Burma and growing influence in Siam. That same year, France sought to establish representation in Luang Prabang and dispatched Auguste Pavie to secure French interests. Pavie and French auxiliaries arrived in Luang Prabang in 1887, in time to witness an attack on Luang Prabang by Chinese and Thai bandits, hoping to liberate the brothers of their leader Deo Van Tiaf, who were being held prisoner by the Siamese. Pavie prevented the capture of the ailing King Un Kam by ferrying him away from the burning city to safety. The incident won the gratitude of the king, provided an opportunity for France to gain control of the Sip Song Chutai as part of Tonkin in French Indochina, and demonstrated the weakness of the Siamese in Laos. In 1892, Pavie became resident minister in Bangkok, where he encouraged a French policy which first sought to deny or ignore Siamese sovereignty over Lao territories on the east bank of the Mekong, and secondly to suppress the slavery of upland Laotian and population transfers of Lao Lum by the Siamese as a prelude to establishing a protectorate in Laos. Siam reacted by denying French trading interests, which by 1893 had increasingly involved military posturing and gunboat diplomacy. France and Siam would position troops to deny each other's interests, resulting in a Siamese siege of Kong Island in the south and a series of attacks on French garrisons in the north. The result was the Panam Incident, the Franco-Siamese War, and the ultimate recognition of French territorial claims in Laos. The French were aware that the East Bank territories of the Mekong were a depopulated, devastated country. The Siamese forced population transfers following the Anu Vong Rebellion left only a fifth of the original population on the East Bank. The majority of Lao Lum and Phuan peoples had been resettled to the areas around the Karat Plateau. Territorial gains in 1893 were only a springboard to secure French control of the Mekong, deny Siam as much territorial control as possible by acquiring the Mekong's West Bank territories including the Karat Plateau, and negotiating stable borders with British Burma along the former territories which paid tribute to the Kingdom of Luang Prabang. France settled a treaty with China in 1895, gaining control of Luang Nemtha and Phongzali. British control of the Shan states and French control of the Upper Mekong increased tensions between the colonial rivals. A joint commission completed its work in 1896 and the city of Muang Sing was gained by France. In exchange, France recognized Siamese sovereignty over the areas of the Chao Phraya River basin. However, the issue of Siamese control over the Karat Plateau, which was ethnically and historically Lao, was left open for the French, as was Siamese control over the Malay Peninsula, which favored British interests. Political events in Europe would shape French Indo-Chinese policy, however, and between 1896 and 1904 a new political party took power which viewed Britain as much more of an ally than a colonial rival. In 1904 the Entente Cordiale was signed as part of the alliance against Germany and Austria-Hungary that fought the First World War. The agreement established respective spheres of influence in Southeast Asia, although French territorial claims would continue until 1907 in Cambodia. The French Protectorate of Laos established 2 and at times 3 administrative regions governed from Vietnam in 1893. It was not until 1899 that Laos became centrally administered by a single resident superi based in Savannakhet, and later in Vientiane. The French chose to establish Vientiane as the colonial capital for 2 reasons. Firstly, it was more centrally located between the central provinces and Luang Prabang, and secondly, the French were aware of the symbolic importance of rebuilding the former capital of the Lanzang kingdom which the Siamese had destroyed. As part of French Indochina, both Laos and Cambodia were seen as a source of raw materials and labor for the more important holdings in Vietnam. French colonial presence in Laos was light. The resident superi was responsible for all colonial administration from taxation to justice and public works. The French maintained a military presence in the colonial capital under the Garde Indigène, made up of Vietnamese soldiers under a French commander. In important provincial cities like Luang Prabang, Savanakhet, and Pax there would be an assistant resident, police, paymaster, postmaster, schoolteacher and a doctor. Vietnamese filled most upper-level and mid-level positions within the bureaucracy, with Lao being employed as junior clerks, translators, kitchen staff and general laborers. Villages remained under the traditional authority of the local headmen or Chow Muang. Throughout the colonial administration in Laos, the French presence never amounted to more than a few thousand Europeans. The French concentrated on the development of infrastructure, the abolition of slavery and indentured servitude, although corvée labor was still in effect. Trade including opium production, and most importantly the collection of taxes. The Lao response to French colonialism was mixed. Although the French were viewed as preferable to the Siamese by the nobility, the majority of Lao Lum, Lao Thieng, and Lao Sung were burdened by regressive taxes and demands for corvée labor to establish colonial outposts. The first serious resistance to the French colonial presence began in southern Laos, as the Holy Man's Rebellion, led by Onkyo, and would last until 1910. The rebellion began in 1901 when a French commissioner in Salavan was attempting to pacify Lao Thieng tribes for taxation and corvée labor. Onkyo provoked anti-French sentiment and in response the French burned a local temple. The commissioner and his troops were massacred and a general uprising began throughout the Bolivian plateau. Onkyo would be killed by French forces, but for several years his harassment and protests gained popularity in the southern Laos. It was not until the movement spread to the Karat Plateau and threatened to become an international incident involving Siam that several French columns of the Garde Indigène converged to put down the rebellion. In the North, Tailu groups from the areas around Phongzali and Muang Sing also began to rebel against French attempts at taxation and corvée labor. In 1914 the Tailu king had fled to the Chinese portions of the Sep Song Pana, where he began a 2-year guerrilla campaign against the French in northern Laos, which required 3 military expeditions to suppress and resulted in direct French control of Muang Sing. In northeast Laos, Chinese and Lao Thieng rebelled against French attempts to tax the opium trade, which resulted in another rebellion from 1914 to 1917. By 1915 most of northeast Laos was controlled by Chinese and Lao Thieng rebels. The French dispatched the largest military presence yet to Laos, which included 160 French officers and 2,500 Vietnamese troops divided into columns. The French drove the Chinese-led rebels across the Chinese border and placed Phongzali under direct colonial control. Yet northeastern Laos was still not entirely pacified, and among shaman named Puch A View attempted to establish a Hmong homeland through a rebellion, pejoratively termed the Madman's War, which lasted from 1919 to 1921. By 1920 the majority of French Laos was at peace and colonial order had been established. In 1928 the first school for the training of Lao civil servants was established, and allowed for the upward mobility of Lao to fill positions occupied by the Vietnamese. Throughout the 1920s and 1930s France attempted to implement Western, particularly French, education, modern healthcare and medicine, and public works with mixed success. The budget for colonial Laos was secondary to Hanoi, and the worldwide Great Depression further restricted funds. It was also in the 1920s and 1930s that the first stirrings of Lao nationalist identity emerged due to the work of Prince Fetserath Ratanavongsa and the French École Française d'Extrême Orient to restore ancient monuments, temples, and conduct general research into Lao history, literature, art and architecture. French interest in indigenous history served a dual purpose in Laos. It reinforced the image of the colonial mission as protection against Siamese domination, and was also a legitimate route for scholarship. Part 7, Colonialism and the French Protectorate of Laos. Chapter 1, World War II. Developing Lao national identity gained importance in 1938 with the rise of the ultranationalist Prime Minister Phibun Songkharam in Bangkok. Phibun Songkharam renamed Siam to Thailand, a name change which was part of a larger political movement to unify all Thai peoples under the central Thai of Bangkok. The French viewed these developments with alarm, but the Vichy government was diverted by events in Europe and World War II. Despite a non-aggression treaty signed in June 1940, Thailand took advantage of the French position and initiated the Franco-Thai War. The war concluded unfavorably for Lao interests with the Treaty of Tokyo, and the loss of Trans-Mekong territories of Xania Buri and part of Champasak. The result was Lao distrust of the French and the first overtly national cultural movement in Laos, which was in the odd position of having limited French support. Charles Rocher, the French director of public education in Vientiane, and Lao intellectuals led by Nyai Yafai and Kataid on Sasorath began the movement for national renovation. Yet the wider impact of World War II had little effect on Laos until February 1945, when a detachment from the Japanese Imperial Army moved into Jingkuang. The Japanese preempted that the Vichy administration of French Indochina under Admiral de Coux would be replaced by a representative of the Free French loyal to Charles de Gaulle and initiated Operation Migosakusen. The Japanese succeeded in the internment of the French living in Vietnam and Cambodia, but in the remote areas of Laos the French were able with the help of the Lao and Garde Indigene to establish jungle bases which were supplied by British airdrops from Burma. However, French control in Laos had been sidelined. Part 7, Colonialism and the French Protectorate of Laos. Chapter 2, Laos Era and Independence. 1945 was a watershed year in the history of Laos. Under Japanese pressure, King Sis of Angvong declared independence in April. The move allowed the various independence movements in Laos, including the Lao Seri and Lao Pen Lao, to coalesce into the Laos Era or Free Lao movement, which was led by Prince Fetserath and opposed the return of Laos to the French. The Japanese surrender on the 15th of August 1945 emboldened pro-French factions, and Prince Fetserath was dismissed by King Sis of Angvong. Undeterred, Prince Fetserath staged a coup in September and placed the royal family in Luang Prabang under house arrest. On the 12th of October 1945, the Laos Era government was declared under the civil administration of Prince Fetserath. In the next 6 months the French rallied against the Laos Era and were able to reassert control over Indochina in April 1946. The Laos Era government fled to Thailand, where they maintained opposition to the French until 1949, when the group split over questions regarding relations with the Viet Minh and the Communist Path at Lao was formed. With the Laos Era in exile, in August 1946 France instituted a constitutional monarchy in Laos headed by King Sis of Angvong, and Thailand agreed to return territories seized during the Franco-Thai War in exchange for representation at the United Nations. The Franco-Lao General Convention of 1949 provided most members of the Laos Era with a negotiated amnesty and sought appeasement by establishing the Kingdom of Laos, a quasi-independent constitutional monarchy within the French Union. In 1950, additional powers were granted to the Royal Lao government, including training and assistance for a national army. On October 22, 1953, the Franco-Lao Treaty of Amity and Association transferred remaining French powers to the independent Royal Lao government. by 1954 the defeat at Dien Bien Phu brought 8 years of fighting with the Viet Minh during the First Indo-Chinese War to an end, and France abandoned all claims to the colonies of Indochina. Part 8. The Kingdom of Laos and the Lao Civil War 1953 to 1975. Elections were held in 1955 and the first coalition government, led by Prince Suvarnabhuma, was formed in 1957. The coalition government collapsed in 1958. In 1960 Captain Congla staged a coup when the cabinet was away at the royal capital of Luang Prabang and demanded reformation of a neutralist government. The second coalition government, once again led by Suvarnabhuma, was not successful in holding power. Rightist forces under General Phu My Savan drove out the neutralist government from power later that same year. The North Vietnamese invaded Laos between 1958 to 1959 to create the Ho Chi Minh Trail. A second Geneva Conference, held in 1961-62, provided for the independence and neutrality of Laos, but the agreement meant little in reality and the war soon resumed. Growing North Vietnamese military presence in the country increasingly drew Laos into the Second Indochina War. 1954 to 1975. As a result, for nearly a decade, eastern Laos was subjected to some of the heaviest bombing in the history of warfare, as the US sought to destroy the Ho Chi Minh Trail that passed through Laos and defeat the communist forces. The North Vietnamese also heavily backed the Pathet Lao and repeatedly invaded Laos. The government and army of Laos were backed by the US during the conflict. The United States trained both regular Royal Lao forces and irregular forces, among whom many were the Hmong and other ethnic minorities. Shortly after the Paris Peace Accords led to the withdrawal of US forces from Vietnam, a ceasefire between the Pathet Lao and the government led to a new coalition government. However, North Vietnam never withdrew from Laos and the Pathet Lao remained little more than a proxy army for Vietnamese interests. After the fall of South Vietnam to communist forces in April 1975, the Pathet Lao with the backing of North Vietnam were able to take total power with little resistance. On December 2, 1975, the king was forced to abdicate his throne and the Lao People's Democratic Republic was established. Around 300,000 people out of a total population of 3 million left Laos by crossing the border into Thailand following the end of the Civil War. Part 9. The Lao People's Democratic Republic 1975-present. The new communist government led by Khe Sony Phumvihane imposed centralized economic decision-making and incarcerated many members of the previous government and military in re-education camps, which also included the Hmongs. While nominally independent, the communist government was for many years effectively little more than a puppet regime run from Vietnam. The government's policies prompted about 10% of the Lao population to leave the country. Laos depended heavily on Soviet aid channeled through Vietnam up until the Soviet collapse in 1991. In the 1990s, the Communist Party gave up centralized management of the economy but still has a monopoly of political power. This recording is a derivative work from Wikipedia. For more information, please visit www.frogcast.org.
ปีไต่ดำเฮาเสียดาย ทุกถิ่นทุกทางจงหักกันนะได้นำเฮานา15 ปีได้ดำเฮาเสียดายเด้
One's first impression of Vientiane is of a sleepy, backwater city set on the bend in the Mekong River. A city of quiet streets, tree-lined boulevards, grand avenues, glimpses of her imperial and colonial past, and numerous Buddhist temples. This is all true. Dig a little deeper though, and you'll find that Vientiane has undergone several metamorphoses in her turbulent history, none more so than in the last century. There is no better illustration of these changes than those reflected in the variety of her rich architectural antecedents. My story begins when Laos became a French colony. When France formally took control of Laos in 1893, they found a largely ruined and desolate place, sacked first by the Siamese and later ransacked by Ho bandits. In the main, Vientiane was derelict, consisting of dilapidated, mainly wooden or bamboo stilted houses with thatched roofs, grouped around overgrown ruins of former temples and palaces. To reconstruct both residential and commercial areas of the city, the French authorities encouraged 30 Vietnamese families to move from Vientiane from Vietnam. These included carpenters, masons, interpreters, teachers, clerks and servants. In contrast to the rest of French Indochina, the French colonial government in Laos had a limited budget for infrastructural development and was unable to fund large French-style buildings on the same scale as in Hanoi, Saigon and to a lesser extent Phnom Penh. However, French colonial architecture still made an impact. The first major building to be constructed in the city was the Résidence Supérieure in 1902, strategically situated in the grounds of the ruined royal palace and adjacent to the Ha Pa Cao. This was followed by the construction of the nearby headquarters of the Service de Travaux Publics, completed in 1907. This now houses the Embassy of France. Within a short time, work began on the Plan de Limon, a grid system for the capital, leading from the Mekong River. As part of the plan, a new thoroughfare was created called the l'Avenue de France, now known as the Avenue Lanzan. The avenue leads out of the city in a northeasterly direction, parallel to the ancient Thanon Nongburn. By the year 1920, a sewage system and basic electricity grid were in place. One of the earliest commercial buildings that still survives is the Education Printing Office. Originally built as the L'École Professionnelle between 1910 and 1911, the former school dormitories today house the printing works. The area around formed part of the core colonial establishment district that surrounded the French embassy. It included the Bureau de la Résidence, built in 1915. Today, it houses the offices of the Ministry of Information and Culture. Facing La Résidence is the Lycée Auguste Pavie, built in 1920. This now forms the heart of the Lao School of Medicine. Constructed in 1925, the Hôtel de Commissariat, the office of the French governor, subsequently housed the Ministry of Defence. In 1980, the building changed usage, becoming the Revolutionary Exhibition Hall. In 1985, the building was upgraded to become the Lao Revolutionary Museum, and finally in the year 2000, it was re-established as the Lao National Museum. The Église du Sacré-Cœur, Church of the Sacred Heart, was built in 1928. This Catholic church served both the French community and the Vietnamese administrative staff. Whilst the French colonial government established national libraries in Vietnam and Cambodia, they only created a small city library in Vientiane. In addition to the government and commercial buildings, the French also had two-story brick and stucco villas constructed, with pitched tile roofs and wooden shuttered windows. These houses accommodated the colonial administrators and their families. As in Vietnam and Cambodia, the provincial French design was modified to suit the hot and humid tropical climate, with the addition of balconies, verandas and internal corridors. The actual building of these homes was entrusted, in the main, to the migrant Vietnamese labour force, who were allowed to build their own two-story shop houses in areas designated to them. Today, although many of these houses have disappeared, a good deal survive, although not always in fine condition. A number have changed usage to become restaurants, bars and banks, and a few remain as built in Buddhist temples. The early 1950s were years of optimism following independence from France. During this time, new and innovative architectural styles appeared. Important public buildings from this era include the original National Assembly building, built in 1952, now forms part of the Prime Minister's office. The Lycée de Vientiane, built in 1956. The Mahasot Maternity Hospital. École de Sacré-Cœur. The Vientiane Municipal Swimming Pool. The Central Post Office, and the National Stadium. The latter part of the 1950s saw the deterioration in the political situation of the Royal Lao government, and few public works were therefore commissioned. The most recognised building from this period is the Patuxai Monumental Arch, dating to 1957. Said to have been constructed from US-purchased cement destined for the construction of a new airport, the arch has the nickname the Vertical Runway. The last major public building project under the Royal Lao government was the Presidential Palace, an elegant two-story Beaux-Arts-style mansion designed by local architect Kampong Poniko. The site on which the palace stands had been the heart of the Lao Royal Palace complex, although it had remained an overgrown wasteland for some 73 years. Construction began in 1973, following the formation of the final coalition government. However, the building was not completed until 1986, when it was finally opened as the reception and ceremonial hall for visiting heads of state. The second part of my story will bring us from 1975 to the present day.
สวัสดีครับคุณผู้ชมครับนี่คือรายการอาเซียนสตอรี่นะครับวันนี้ผมพาคุณผู้ชมมาอยู่ที่นครหลวงเวียงจันทร์สาธารณรัฐประชาธิปไตยประชาชนลาวครับ และที่เห็นอยู่นี่ก็คืออนุสาวรีย์ของเจ้าอนุวงศ์นะครับอดีตวีรกษัตริย์ของลาวซึ่งตั้งตระหง่านอยู่ตรงกันข้ามกับอำเภอศรีเชียงใหม่จังหวัดหนองคายซึ่งรัฐบาลลาวได้ทำการเปิดอนุสาวรีย์แห่งนี้ไปเมื่อวันที่ 7 พฤศจิกายน พุทธศักราช 2553 ในทางประวัติศาสตร์นั้นเราได้รับรู้เรื่องราวของอดีตกษัตริย์พระองค์นี้ผ่านการศึกสงครามระหว่างสองประเทศซึ่งก็สอดคล้องกับพงศาวดารของไทยนะครับที่บันทึกเรื่องราวต่างๆเอาไว้ในฐานะของผู้ชนะโดยไทยนั้นมองว่าเจ้าอนุวงศ์เป็นกบฏต่อราชสำนักสยามแต่ในทางกลับกันนะครับลาวก็บอกว่าเจ้าอนุวงศ์นั้นคืออดีตกษัตริย์ที่พยายามจะกอบกู้เอกราชและความเป็นชาติของลาวกลับคืนมาและแน่นอนครับปฏิเสธไม่ได้ว่าเรื่องราวทางประวัติศาสตร์นี้เองที่ทำให้เกิดตะกอนของความขุ่นมัวในใจของผู้คนทั้งสองประเทศด้วยมาอาเซียนสตอรี่ในวันนี้นะครับเราจะนำคุณผู้ชมไปรู้จักเรื่องราวของเจ้าอนุวงศ์และแน่นอนครับเราจะร่วมกันหาทางออกจากประวัติศาสตร์บาดแผลในเรื่องนี้กันครับอนุสาวรีย์เจ้าอนุวงศ์ความสูง15 เมตรหล่อด้วยทองแดงน้ำหนักกว่า8 ตันตั้งตระหง่านอยู่ริมฝั่งแม่น้ำโขงของสปป.ลาวบ่ายพระพักมาทางอำเภอศรีเชียงใหม่จังหวัดหนองคายนี่คืออนุสาวรีย์วีรกษัตริย์ที่ใหญ่ที่สุดของสปป.ลาวและนี่คือการตอกย้ำการรับรู้ของคนลาวที่ยกย่องให้เจ้าอนุวงศ์คือกษัตริย์ผู้ยิ่งใหญ่ในฐานะวีรบุรุษที่ลุกขึ้นมาต่อสู้เพื่อปลดแอกจากการปกครองจากสยามประเทศขณะที่เพียงข้ามโขงการรับรู้ผ่านพระราชพงศาวดารและตำราเรียนกลับบันทึกเรื่องราวของพระองค์ไว้ในฐานะของผู้พ่ายแพ้สงครามและพระองค์คือกบฏแห่งราชสำนักสยามปีพุทธศักราช 2322 สมเด็จพระเจ้ากรุงธนบุรีโปรดให้เจ้าพระยามหากษัตริย์ศึกขึ้นไปตีเมืองเวียงจันทร์เนื่องจากไม่พอใจที่เจ้าสิริบุญสารมีท่าทีฝักใฝ่ในพม่าการศึกคราวนั้นได้ทำให้อาณาจักรลาวทั้ง3ได้แก่อาณาจักรล้านช้างเวียงจันทร์อาณาจักรล้านช้างหลวงพระบางและอาณาจักรล้านช้างจำปาสักตกอยู่ภายใต้อิทธิพลสยามอย่างสิ้นเชิงครั้งแรกเมื่อยึดเวียงจันทร์ได้เจ้าพระยามหากษัตริย์ศึกได้นำพระแก้วมรกตและพระบางข้ามโขงมาประดิษฐานไว้ชั่วคราวที่วัดพระแก้วเมืองพรานพร้าวที่ยังคงปรากฏหลักฐานซากโบราณสถานให้เห็นอยู่